So are you still storing password, API keys or database credentials directly inside your Python code? This might work today, but the moment those values change, you will be editing source code, redeploying application and potentially exposing sensitive information. So in this video tutorial, we will show you the professional way to manage configuration using environment variables and .env file in Python. Now, if you are wondering what are environment variables, these are values which are stored outside your Python code. Instead of hard coding things like API keys, database passwords or application settings, we store them separately and read them at runtime. This makes the application more secure, portable and easier to configure across deployment, testing and production environments. Now let's first look at what not to do. Here you can see an example where we have hard-coded secrets directly inside our code. This hard coding creates several problems. Now anyone with the access of your repository can see those credentials. Rotating credentials becomes very difficult and moving between the environments means changing the source code. This is why professional applications uses environment variables. Now Python provides built-in OS module for working with environment variables. Let's see how we can use this. So I will first import the OS module, and instead of hard coding this, let's use os.environ. So using os.environ works like a dictionary. So I will define square brackets, and in the square brackets I will define the name of the environment variable. So for example, let me name it as new API key. Now let's quickly comment the other code and let's simply print this API key first, so that we can simply understand the use case first and then we will use it practically. Let me quickly run this code. So what we are trying to do here in this code is we are trying to access the variable, environment variable called new API key. If this value exists, then Python returns its value. But if the variable is missing, you will get a key error. So currently we are getting this key error. Why we are getting this key error? Because we have not defined this environment variable. Let me quickly define this. So let me define this. How I can define this? I will use the keyword set, then the name of the environment variable, then equal to, then its value. So for example, let's take a test value and hit enter. So by using this, I have created a temporary environment variable. Now if I run this code, I will get the value, which is test_value, which I stored. So as we discussed, if the variable is missing, we will get an key error. Another safer option is by using the getenv method. So what getenv method will do, instead of throwing an exception, it returns none when the variable does not exist. So instead of using this, I will use getenv, and getenv is a method here, and in the method we need to pass the variable name. So for example, I will look for API_key. Now this key does not exist because I have not created it yet, but let's run this code and see what it returns. So as discussed, it returns none. If I define this value, I will get the proper value. So for example, if I check for new API key which I created previously, and if I run this, I will get the proper value. Now we can even provide some default value by using this getenv method. This is extremely useful for optional configuration settings. In the getenv method, the second parameter is for the default value. So for example, if I define a default value as test_value, and again if we look for a key which does not exist, it should return the default value. So we get the test_value. So this is how we can use getenv method. Now in real projects, developer rarely creates environment variables manually every time they run an application. Instead, they generally use .env file. So I have already created a .env file. Let's see how we can use this. This file stores environment specific configuration. For example, here we need API key. So we can define API key equal to, then the value. Let me define it as test key value. Now in the code also we need to make some important changes. So here first we need to install one package. So we need to install python-dotenv. So this command will help to install the .env package in our Python environment. Let it complete first. Once the installation is completed, we need to jump to our code, and in the code we need to import one module from .env. So I will write from .env import load underscore .env, and then we need to call this load.env method. The load.env function or method reads the .env file and loads those values into your application's environment. Now if we run this code, let me clear the screen and run the code. I got the exact value which I have stored in the .env file. Now one important thing that many beginners don't realize is that environment variables are always string. So for example, you need to import some integer value. For example, I will say timeout, and I'm setting the timeout value as 10. Here we need to convert this value before using it. So in the code, let me quickly fetch the timeout value as well. Timeout here as well, and I will try to print the type of this timeout value. So I will use the type function, and in the type function I will pass the timeout value. Let's print this as well. So here you can see by default the value of the timeout is string, even though we have defined an integer value in this. For this we need to convert this value. So what I will do, I will fetch the complete value and pass it to int function. Now if I run this, the value is successfully converted into integer. So whenever we are using numbers or booleans, we need to convert them ourselves. Now here are the best practices every Python developer should follow. We should always keep the secrets outside of our source code. We should always add .env file to gitignore, because perhaps the biggest mistake usually developers make is by committing your .env file to GitHub, and by adding the .env file to gitignore, it will not push our .env file to our GitHub repository. Next, we should always use meaningful uppercase names. We should always provide default value for optional values. We should always try to validate required variables during application startup, and at the last, we should never expose credentials in logs or screenshots. Now you know how professional Python application manage configuration using environment variables and .env file. And if you found this useful, subscribe for more Python tutorials, and let us know in the comments what Python topics you will like us to cover next. Thank you so much for watching this video. We will meet you in the next one.